Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
My husband and I have been married for a couple of years now. We bought our first house together about 8 months ago, and honestly, it's been amazing having our own space. We're both pretty neat people, and we've got our routines down. The problem started when my husband's sister needed a place to stay. She'd been having some financial troubles after losing her job, and her lease was up. My husband felt bad for her, so he suggested she could stay in our guest room for a few weeks while she got back on her feet. I wasn't thrilled about it, but I agreed because family is family, right? She moved in on a Tuesday. By Thursday, I knew we had a problem. I have a pretty specific morning routine. I wash my face, then apply a vitamin C serum, then moisturizer with sunscreen. I've been using the same products for months, so I know exactly how much is in each bottle. The vitamin C serum I use isn't cheap. It's about $60 for a small bottle, but it lasts me about 2 months if I use it correctly. Thursday morning I picked up the bottle and it felt lighter than it should have. I held it up to the light and could see the level was definitely lower than it had been the day before. I thought maybe I was imagining things, so I made a mental note to pay attention. Friday morning, same thing. The bottle was noticeably lighter. My moisturizer seemed to be going down faster too. I started getting annoyed. These weren't cheap products. And more importantly, they were mine. I'd specifically bought them for my skin type and concerns. I decided to ask her about it casually while we were having coffee. I asked if she'd been using any of the stuff in the main bathroom. She asked what stuff. I mentioned the skincare products on the counter. She said no, that she'd just been washing her face with soap. The way she said it, with this little laugh and avoiding eye contact, I knew she was lying. But I didn't want to cause drama. So I just said, okay, and left it alone. Over the weekend, I kept checking. The levels kept going down. By Monday, I was getting really irritated. This woman was clearly using my expensive products and lying to my face about it. I brought it up to my husband, but he just said maybe I was using more than I thought, or maybe the bottles were defective. He didn't want to rock the boat with his sister. Tuesday morning, I confronted her again. I told her I knew someone had been using my skincare stuff because the bottles were half empty. She said she didn't know what I was talking about and suggested maybe I was just using more than I thought. She had this innocent expression on her face, like she genuinely had no idea what I was talking about. It was infuriating. I told her that if she wanted to use some of my products, she should just ask, but please don't lie about it. She insisted she wasn't lying and said she didn't even know what I used that stuff for, that she just used soap and water. I could feel my blood boiling, but I kept my voice calm. I said, okay, but if she did decide to try anything, please ask first because some of these products can be harsh if you don't know how to use them. She just said, sure, whatever. The dismissive way she said it told me everything I needed to know. She was going to keep using my stuff, and she was going to keep lying about it. That's when I got the idea. At work, I deal with a lot of different skin conditions. One of the most common is actinic keratosis, these rough, scaly patches that develop from sun damage. We treat them with a prescription cream that's basically a controlled chemical burn. It removes the damaged skin cells, but it's incredibly harsh. If you use too much or use it wrong, you end up with serious chemical burns, swelling, and this distinctive orange-red discoloration that takes weeks to fade. I had a small tube of this cream at home because I've been treating a small patch on my arm. The tube was almost identical to my vitamin C serum bottle. Same size, same color, same general shape. The only difference was the label. Wednesday night, I carefully peeled off the label from the keratosis cream and replaced it with the label from my vitamin C serum. I put the relabeled tube exactly where my serum usually sat and moved the real serum to my bedroom. Thursday morning, I got up extra early and waited. I could hear her moving around in the guest room, then heard the bathroom door close. I waited about 10 minutes, then went to check. The tube was in a slightly different position than where I'd left it. Got her. I went about my normal morning routine and headed to work. I was curious to see what would happen, but I didn't expect to see results so quickly. When I got home that evening, she was sitting on the couch with a baseball cap pulled low over her face. She looked up when I walked in, and I had to bite my tongue to keep from gasping. Her entire face was red and blotchy. There were patches of orange discoloration around her cheeks and forehead, and her skin looked inflamed and angry. She looked like she'd been crying. I asked what happened to her face. She said she didn't know that she'd woken up like that and thought she was having an allergic reaction to something. I asked if she'd used any new products or changed her laundry detergent. She said no, that she'd been using the same stuff she always used. She was clearly panicking, and I almost felt bad. Almost. I suggested maybe she should see a doctor if it doesn't get better. Friday morning it was worse. The discoloration had spread and she looked like she was in real discomfort. She was wearing sunglasses inside and had covered most of her face with a scarf. I was starting to feel guilty, but then I remembered how she'd been lying to my face for over a week while stealing my expensive products. I told her I'd been thinking about what she said yesterday and asked if she was sure she didn't try any new skincare products. She said, well, maybe she might have used that little bottle in my bathroom, just a tiny bit, but she thought it was for everyone to use. She said it with this nervous laugh, like she was testing the waters to see if I'd buy this obvious lie. I asked which bottle she meant. She described the small yellowish one. I said, oh God, that was my prescription cream for actinic keratosis, and it was definitely not a for everyone kind of thing. Her face went white under all the red and orange blotchiness. She asked if it was prescription and what it did. I explained it was basically a controlled chemical burn that removes damaged skin cells. I told her you're supposed to use just a tiny amount on specific spots, and only for a few days at a time. She asked if she was going to be okay. I said yeah, she'd be fine, that it would probably take a few weeks for the discoloration to fade completely, but there shouldn't be any permanent damage. Then I suggested maybe next time she should ask before using someone else's medical products. I said it in the sweetest, most innocent voice I could manage, then walked away and let her sit with that information. She spent the next week hiding in the guest room, only coming out when she absolutely had to. When she did, she was always wearing a hat and sunglasses. She never said anything to me about it, but she also never touched my stuff again. 2 weeks later, she announced she'd found a new place and would be moving out at the end of the month. Her face was still slightly discolored when she left, and she couldn't quite look me in the eye when she said goodbye. My husband asked me later if I knew what had happened to her face. I just shrugged and said she must have had a reaction to something. He seemed satisfied with that explanation. I haven't had any problems with missing skincare products since then. My house has a tiny garage where I keep my old Honda, and since I only have one car, the street spot in front of my place stays empty most of the time. About 6 months back, something really strange started happening. Every other Thursday morning, this dark red Mazda would pull up and park right in front of my house. At first, I figured maybe someone was visiting a neighbor on a regular schedule, or maybe it was a nurse or teacher who had weekly appointments in the area. The car would show up around 7 in the morning and just sit there for hours. I could see it from my desk where I work, and it started getting on my nerves. Not because they couldn't park there, anyone can park on the street, but because it seemed so weird and random. Why always my house? There were tons of other empty spots they could use. After this went on for about 2 months, I started keeping track. I wrote down every date and time the car showed up. The pattern was perfect. Every other Thursday, like someone had set an alarm. I found out what was really going on totally by accident. One day, I was walking my dog and decided to take a different route through the neighborhood. We ended up on a street a few blocks away, and there was that same red Mazda parked in front of a house with messy bushes and a dirty driveway. The license plate was exactly the same. I put 2 and 2 together. I went home and dug out the street cleaning schedule the city had mailed me when I moved in. I compared it to my calendar and discovered something unbelievable. The days that car parked in front of my house matched exactly with the days our street got swept. Their street got cleaned on completely different days. These people had figured out that they could move their car to my street on cleaning days, so their own street would get properly swept while mine got blocked. They were basically stealing the street cleaning service from me and my neighbors so their curb would stay nice and clean. I walked back to their street the next day to confirm my theory. Sure enough, their section of curb was spotless while mine had weeks of built-up leaves and dirt. I was so mad when I realized how sneaky they were being. This wasn't just some random coincidence. They had looked up both cleaning schedules and decided to screw over other people so they could benefit. I decided it was time to teach them a lesson. But first I wanted to see exactly what their routine was. The next Thursday I got up early and watched from my window. The car arrived at exactly 7 o'clock in the morning. A woman got out, looked around to make sure no one was watching, then walked quickly back toward their street. About 3 hours later, right after the street sweeper finished our block, she came back and drove away. It was completely planned out. The following Thursday morning, I got up extra early and dragged my 2 big garbage cans out to the curb. I spaced them out so there was no way a car could fit between them. Then I went back inside and waited to see what would happen. Right at 7 o'clock, I heard the car coming down the street. I watched through my window when they slowed down and saw my trash cans blocking their usual spot. The driver sat there for a minute, probably wondering what was going on. Then they drove around the block, maybe hoping the cans would be gone when they came back. When they circled back and the cans were still there, they had to find somewhere else to park. They ended up 3 houses down in front of another neighbor's place. I watched the same middle-aged woman in work clothes get out of the car. She looked really annoyed when she stared at my trash cans, then started walking toward their real house. I could see her shaking her head and muttering something. I waited until she was far enough away, then I put my plan into action. I got my keys and pulled my Honda out of the garage. I drove over to their street and found their house. The spot in front was wide open just like I expected. I parked my car right where their car normally sat. It was perfect payback. They wanted a clean street at everyone else's expense, so now they could watch the street sweeper work around my car instead of theirs. I walked back home and moved my trash cans back where they belonged, just in time for the street sweeper to come through. I watched from my window when it cleaned the whole curb in front of my house, including the spot where that car usually blocked the cleaning. The sweeper truck made several passes to get all the built-up debris that had been accumulating for months. About an hour later, I saw the woman walking back to where she had parked. I could see her from my window when she stopped and looked around, obviously confused about where her car had gone. She walked up and down the street twice, checking every car. She got out her phone and started making what looked like a frantic call, probably thinking her car had been stolen or towed. Then she started walking faster toward her own street, and I could tell she was getting more upset with each step. I decided to take my dog for a walk to see her reaction firsthand. When I got to their street, I could see her standing next to my Honda with her phone pressed to her ear. She was gesturing wildly while talking to whoever was on the other end. When she hung up, she walked around my car several times, probably trying to figure out what was happening. Then she noticed the street sweeper working its way down her block, cleaning around my Honda instead of giving her curb the usual thorough cleaning. Her face went completely red when she realized what had happened. She knew someone had figured out her scheme and turned it against her. I really wished I could have seen her face when she found my Honda sitting in her usual parking spot, but watching her pace around angrily was pretty satisfying. By then, the street sweeper had already finished, leaving her curb just as dirty as usual while mine was perfectly clean for the first time in months. About 20 minutes later, she came marching down to my street. She walked right up to my front door and rang the doorbell multiple times. I watched through the peephole but didn't answer. She stood there for a few minutes, then walked back to check on my Honda again. She tried calling someone else, probably her husband, and I could hear her raised voice from inside my house. Eventually, she gave up and walked home. I never saw that red Mazda on my street again after that day. Once they got a taste of their own medicine, they decided to find a different way to deal with their street cleaning problem. Maybe they started using their own driveway like normal people, or maybe they found some other neighborhood to take advantage of. Either way, my street stays clean now. I'm a single mom working 2 jobs just to make ends meet. My little one is only 18 months old, and I've been struggling to afford even the basic stuff she needs. After saving up for months from my tips at the diner and my weekend cleaning job, I finally managed to buy a decent stroller. Nothing fancy, but it was sturdy and had good wheels that actually rolled straight. I've been using this beat-up hand-me-down stroller that my neighbor gave me when my daughter was born. One of the wheels was completely busted, so it would veer to the left constantly. The fabric was torn in 3 places and the safety straps were held together with duct tape. Every time I took my daughter anywhere, I felt embarrassed pushing that thing around, but I couldn't afford anything better. When I finally got enough money saved up, I went to the baby store and found this stroller on clearance. It was still $200, which was huge for me, but it was originally $400. The sales guy told me it was a floor model that had been returned once but was in perfect condition. I counted out my crumpled bills and paid for it right there. That stroller meant everything to me. It represented months of skipping meals, not buying myself anything, and working extra shifts. But seeing my daughter comfortable and safe in it made every sacrifice worth it. So there I was, about 3 weeks after buying it, walking through the parking lot outside the grocery store. My daughter was fast asleep in the stroller, and I had just finished shopping for the week. I was loading the bags into my car when I heard footsteps behind me. This woman approached me, probably in her 40s, carrying a designer purse. She was looking at my stroller with this weird expression. The woman asked me where I got the stroller. I told her I bought it at the baby store downtown and asked why she wanted to know. She claimed that the stroller was actually hers and that someone must have sold it by mistake. I was confused because that made no sense at all. I explained that I had bought it brand new. Well, it was a floor model, but I had the receipt to prove it. She insisted that it was definitely her stroller because she could tell from a little scratch on the handle. She pointed to a tiny mark that, honestly, could have been on any stroller. I started feeling uncomfortable. I told her that I really did buy the stroller and offered to show her my receipt. She said she didn't know what kind of scam I was trying to pull, but she was taking her stroller back. Before I could react, she grabbed the handle and started pulling the stroller away from me. My daughter was still sleeping inside, completely unaware of what was happening. I yelled at her to stop and told her my baby was in there, but she either didn't hear me or didn't care. She was already speed walking across the parking lot, pushing my daughter in the stroller. I dropped my grocery bags and started running after her, screaming at the top of my lungs for people to stop her because she was stealing my stroller with my baby inside. A few people in the parking lot turned to look, but nobody moved at first. Karen was moving surprisingly fast for someone her age, and she was heading toward the black car parked near the street. I kept yelling for someone to please stop her because she had my child. That's when this huge guy who was loading groceries into his truck looked up and saw what was happening. He was probably 6.5 feet tall and built like he spent all day at the gym. The big guy shouted at her to stop right there. Karen turned around and saw him jogging toward her. She tried to push the stroller faster, but one of the wheels got caught on a curb. The stroller tipped slightly and my daughter started crying. The big guy caught up to her and blocked her path. He asked what was going on and why she was running with the stroller. Karen pointed at me and claimed that the stroller was hers and that I had stolen it from her. I ran up completely out of breath and told him she was lying. I explained that my daughter was in the stroller and it belonged to me because I had just bought it 3 weeks ago. The big guy looked at my crying daughter, then at Karen, then at me. My daughter was reaching her little arms toward me, which made it pretty obvious who her mom was. The big guy told Karen that he needed her to step away from the stroller. Karen protested that I was the thief and that the stroller had cost her $400. I said I had the receipt right in my purse and pointed out that she didn't even know my daughter's name or how old she was. The big guy gently took the stroller handle from Karen and pushed it toward me. I immediately picked up my daughter and held her close. She was scared from all the commotion but stopped crying once she was in my arms. Karen announced that she was calling the police. The big guy said that was a good idea and that we should all wait for the police. He pulled out his phone and dialed. While we waited, more people had gathered around after hearing the shouting. Karen kept insisting the stroller was hers, but when people asked her basic questions about the baby, she couldn't answer any of them. Someone asked what the baby's name was. Karen said that wasn't relevant. Another person asked how old the baby was. Karen replied that she didn't have to answer these questions. Meanwhile, I was able to tell everyone my daughter's exact age, her favorite foods, the name of her pediatrician, and even sing the little song I always sang to her. It was pretty clear who was telling the truth. When the police arrived, I showed them my receipt, my daughter's birth certificate that I keep in my purse, and even photos on my phone of her in that exact stroller from the past few weeks. Karen couldn't provide any proof of purchase or any evidence that the stroller belonged to her. The officer looked at Karen and asked if she was seriously telling him that she tried to steal a stroller with a baby inside. Karen insisted she wasn't stealing anything and that the stroller belonged to her. The officer asked if she had any proof like a receipt or photos. Karen said she shouldn't need proof because it was obviously hers. The officer shook his head and started writing up a report. Karen was charged with attempted theft and endangering a child. When they were putting her in the police car, she was still yelling about how the stroller was rightfully hers. The big guy who helped me introduced himself and said he was a dad himself. He couldn't believe someone would try to steal a stroller with a baby in it. Several other people in the parking lot came over to make sure my daughter and I were okay. What still gets me is that I don't think Karen even realized there was a baby in the stroller when she first grabbed it. She seemed genuinely surprised when people started talking about my daughter. I think she just saw a nice stroller and decided she wanted it. The fact that there was a sleeping child inside was just an inconvenience to her. I found out later that Karen had a history of shoplifting and had been banned from several stores in the area. Apparently, this wasn't her first time trying to take things that didn't belong to her. The judge gave her community service and ordered her to pay restitution, though I'm not sure what for since she didn't actually damage anything. The whole experience was terrifying, but it also showed me that there are good people out there who will step up when someone needs help. That big guy didn't have to get involved, but he did because it was the right thing to do. Same with all the other people who stayed to give statements to the police. I still use that stroller every day, and every time I do, I remember how much it means to me and how crazy some people can be when they want something that isn't theirs. After what happened last weekend, I need to get this off my chest. My wife and I have been married for 3 years now, and she's always been a bit particular about things. She lived in Japan for 2 years during college, doing some kind of exchange program, and ever since then, she's been obsessed with Japanese culture. I think it's great that she's interested in other cultures, but sometimes she takes it too far. We've been saving up for months to go to this fancy restaurant downtown that does chef's table experiences. It's one of those places where you sit right at the kitchen counter and watch the chefs prepare your meal course by course. The whole experience costs about $300 per person, so this was a really big deal for us. I've been looking forward to it for weeks. The restaurant has this intimate setting with only 12 seats at the chef's table. Everyone sits close together, and you can hear every conversation, every clink of silverware, everything. It's supposed to be this refined, quiet experience where you appreciate the artistry of the food. We got there right on time and were seated between this older couple who seemed really sophisticated and a younger couple on their anniversary. The chef started explaining the menu, and I was already impressed by how professional and elegant everything felt. This was definitely the fanciest place we'd ever eaten at. The first course came out, which was some kind of amuse-bouche that we were supposed to eat in one bite. My wife took a photo of it first, of course, because she always does that. Then the second course arrived, which was a potato leek soup served in these beautiful ceramic bowls. That's when it started. My wife picked up her spoon and took a sip of the soup, but instead of eating it quietly like everyone else, she made this loud slurping sound. Not just once, but with every single spoonful. The sound echoed in the quiet restaurant, and I could see the other diners starting to look over at our direction. I waited for her to realize what she was doing and stop, but she kept going. The older woman next to us actually turned and stared for a moment before looking away with a disgusted expression. The anniversary couple started whispering to each other and looking over at us. I felt my face getting hot with embarrassment. This was supposed to be our special night out, and she was ruining it. I leaned over and whispered to her as quietly as I could, asking if she could maybe not slurp so loudly because people were starting to stare. She looked at me like I'd just insulted her entire family and asked what was wrong with how she was eating. I explained that she was slurping really loudly, and we were in a fancy restaurant, and it was making everyone uncomfortable. She defended herself by saying that in Japan, slurping your soup is considered polite and shows you're enjoying the food. I pointed out that we weren't in Japan, this wasn't even Japanese food, it was potato leek soup, and she was disturbing the other diners. She put her spoon down hard enough that it clinked against the bowl, making even more noise. She asked if I was seriously going to tell her she was eating wrong, and insisted this was how you're supposed to appreciate soup. The chef had stopped talking mid-sentence because our conversation was getting loud enough that everyone could hear it. The entire table was now looking at us, and I wanted to disappear under the floor. I told her I wasn't trying to embarrass her, but this wasn't Japan, and this wasn't Japanese cuisine. The slurping was really loud and everyone was staring at us. She got defensive and accused me of being an a-hole for suggesting she was doing something wrong. She said she knew what she was doing. The older man next to us cleared his throat really loudly, which I think was his way of telling us to shut up. The chef was standing there awkwardly, not sure whether to continue with his presentation or wait for us to finish our argument. I tried to reason with her, saying I was just asking her to eat a little more quietly and that wasn't unreasonable. She turned it around on me, saying I was embarrassing her by making a scene about how she ate. She told me to focus on my own soup instead of policing hers. At this point, she went back to eating her soup and made even louder, slurping sounds like she was doing it on purpose to spite me. Each slurp seemed to echo through the restaurant, and I could see the other diners getting more and more annoyed. The chef finally continued with his presentation, but the mood at the table was completely ruined. The older couple kept shooting us dirty looks, and the anniversary couple seemed like they just wanted to leave. I sat there in mortified silence while my wife continued making noise with every spoonful. When the soup course was finally over, the older woman leaned over to me and asked if it would be possible for me to ask my wife to eat more quietly because they were trying to enjoy their meal. Before I could even respond, my wife jumped in and told the woman she was eating the way soup was supposed to be eaten. She suggested the woman should educate herself about different food cultures before judging people. The older woman replied that this was a French restaurant, not a ramen shop, and that my wife's behavior was quite inappropriate. My wife shot back that she had paid just as much as the older woman to be there, so she would eat however she wanted. The older woman just shook her head and turned back to her husband. I could hear her whisper something about having no class. The rest of the dinner was incredibly awkward. My wife continued to make noise while eating, though thankfully the other courses didn't involve soup. The other diners basically ignored us for the rest of the evening, and the chef seemed to rush through his presentations just to get the whole thing over with. When we got to the car afterward, I tried to talk to her about what had happened. I told her that was really embarrassing, and I couldn't believe she argued with that woman about eating etiquette. She defended herself by saying the woman was being judgmental and rude, and she wasn't going to let her talk down to her. I explained that she was being loud and disruptive and everyone at that table was uncomfortable. She dismissed my concerns, saying that was their problem, not hers, and insisted she knew how to eat properly. I tried to explain that eating properly means considering the people around you and the type of restaurant you're in. I told her that slurping soup at a fancy French restaurant wasn't appropriate, regardless of what they do in Japan. She got even more defensive and asked if I was saying she didn't know how to behave in public. The argument continued all the way home and we didn't speak to each other for the rest of the weekend. She still insists that she did nothing wrong and that everyone else was being uptight and judgmental. The worst part is that we'll probably never be able to go back to that restaurant. The whole experience was ruined, and I'm sure the staff and other diners remember us as that couple who caused a scene during the chef's table dinner. $300 each, completely wasted because my wife couldn't just eat her soup quietly like a normal person. When I was 3, my dad died in a car accident. My mom couldn't handle it and started drinking heavily. which led to drugs. My dad's family had to step in and get me away from her through the courts. My aunt and uncle took me in, and when my mom died about a year later, they officially adopted me. I've been with them ever since. During middle school, I started calling them mom and dad because that's what they are to me. They raised me, loved me, and never made me feel like anything less than their daughter. Nobody in our family ever had a problem with it. That changed this past Memorial Day weekend. My grandparents have this big property where the whole extended family gathers for holidays. This time I was finally going to meet my cousin's fiance. I'd heard about her but never met her in person. Within 5 minutes of meeting her, I could tell she was one of those people. She had this way of talking that made everything sound like it was about her, and she kept interrupting people mid-sentence. On Saturday, we were all sitting outside around the patio table. My mom, dad, cousin, his fiance, and my cousin's parents were there chatting about random stuff. Out of nowhere, the fiance looked at me and made a comment about how much I looked like my mom and nothing like my dad. Then she looked directly at my dad with this smug expression and questioned whether I was really his daughter. The joke fell completely flat. My dad gave one of those uncomfortable courtesy laughs, and my cousin looked mortified. My mom quickly stepped in to explain that I was her brother's daughter, that he had died when I was 3, and that my birth mother couldn't take care of me, so they had been raising me ever since. The fiancé just stared at me like I was some kind of puzzle she was trying to solve. She pointed out that she had heard me call them mom and dad a few minutes earlier. I confirmed that yes, I had called them that. The whole table went quiet. You could hear the wind rustling through the trees and nothing else. Then the fiancé broke the silence by asking why I called them that. I was already getting annoyed with her attitude, but this pushed me over the edge. I told her it was because I could, and because that's what I wanted to call them. She said it was weird because they weren't my real mom and dad, and that she didn't like it when I called them that. I'd had enough of her entitled attitude by that point. I sarcastically told her I'd make sure to write that down in my notes. Everyone at the table just sat there in awkward silence. I could see my cousin's face turning red with embarrassment. I excused myself and went to find my grandma, who was inside watching TV. I spent the rest of the evening with my grandparents, helping my grandma with dinner and avoiding the fiancé. I thought the whole thing was over and done with. The next morning I walked into the kitchen where my mom was having coffee with my grandparents. The fiancé was there too, probably complaining about something else. I walked over to my mom and gave her a hug while greeting her as mom. I saw the fiancé's face immediately scrunch up like she'd just smelled something rotten. She told me again that she had already said she didn't like it when I called them mom and dad, insisting they were my aunt and uncle, not my parents. Before I could even respond, my grandpa set down his coffee mug with a loud clink and turned to face her. His voice had that stern tone he used when he was really irritated. He told her bluntly that it was none of her business what I called them, and that she should mind her own business. The fiancé's mouth dropped open like she couldn't believe someone had just told her off. She mumbled something under her breath that I couldn't quite catch, but she didn't say another word to me directly after that. For the rest of the weekend, she kept giving me these dirty looks whenever we were in the same room. During family photos, she positioned herself as far away from me as possible. When we were all sitting around the fire pit that evening, she made pointed comments about real families and knowing your place. Everyone just ignored her, but the tension was obvious. On Monday morning, when we were all getting ready to leave, the fiancé was loading her stuff into my cousin's car and complaining loudly about how some people don't understand boundaries. My grandma, who's usually the sweetest person in the world, walked right up to her. My grandma told her that I had been through more tragedy in my 18 years than the fiancé had probably faced in her entire life. She explained how my aunt and uncle had stepped up when I needed them most and had been the best parents I could ask for. She said that if the fiancé couldn't respect that, maybe she should think about whether she was ready to be part of this family. The fiancé's face went completely red. She stammered something about just trying to help, but my grandma wasn't having it. My grandma told her that helping would mean keeping her opinions to herself about things that didn't concern her. My cousin looked like he wanted to disappear into the ground. He mumbled an apology to my grandma and quickly got the fiancé into the car. When they drove away, I could see them having what looked like a heated argument through the back window. Later that week, my cousin called to apologize. Apparently, the fiancé had spent the entire drive home complaining about how rude our family was to her. When he explained that she was completely out of line, she threw a fit and said she was just looking out for family values. He told her that if she couldn't accept me as part of the family, then maybe she needed to reconsider whether she wanted to marry into it. I don't know what happened after that conversation, but I haven't heard from or about the fiancé since. My cousin seems relieved whenever we talk, so I'm guessing things worked out. The whole situation made me appreciate my family even more. My parents didn't have to take me in, but they did. They didn't have to love me like their own daughter, but they do. And my grandparents, aunts, uncles, and cousins have never made me feel like anything less than a full member of this family. Some people, like that fiancé, will never understand that family isn't just about blood. It's about the people who show up for you when life gets hard, who love you unconditionally, and who choose to be there every single day. I'm lucky to have found that with my mom and dad, even if it took a tragedy to bring us together. Dating someone who thinks they can control how other people express love and gratitude must be exhausting, but that's his problem to figure out, not mine. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.